Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Day 2 of Life Sciences Innovation Northwest. I'm Alexis Holzer, Assistant Director for Economic Development at Washington State University. And today I get to interview Dr. Corey Casper, who is a member of the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Division at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, as well as a professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's nice
thanks
to be here
for
with
coming
you.
this morning.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to start off. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do at Fred Hutch.
Yeah, my pleasure. Again, thanks again for having me. So I am the director of our program in global oncology at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. It's become one of the key priorities of the Hutchinson Center to understand the burden and the impact of cancer, not just in Washington State and in our region, but also around the globe. And we think that there's a number of very interesting opportunities to make meaningful impacts on cancer prevention and treatment through the study of cancer in places all around the world, specifically in low and middle income countries. And that's the work that I do.
Great. So specifically tell us about the Uganda Cancer Institute.
Sure, yeah, thanks for your question. So it's important to recognize that when you think about the causes of cancer, there are actually four main categories of things that cause cancer. And each cause about a quarter of cancers worldwide. So the first cause of cancer that we think about are perhaps genetic causes of cancer, and about 25% of all of the cancers in the world are caused by some genetic condition. About another quarter of cancers around the world are caused by some environmental factor, and that's a broad sort of category, but it includes things like tobacco use or exposure to environmental pollutants. About a quarter of cancers, we have no idea what causes them. They're completely unknown. And the last quarter of cancers around the world are caused by infectious diseases. So viruses, bacteria, parasites, all can cause cancer, and all do cause about a quarter of cancers worldwide. And although there's lots of research going on at the Hutchinson Center about cancer prevention and treatment, what I'm particularly excited about is that I actually think that we have the tools within our means and within our reach to essentially eliminate a quarter of cancers, and that's those cancers related to infectious diseases. There's a lot of different ways that we see that possibility. So for instance, if we vaccinated every child at birth for hepatitis B, something we do universally in the United States, but not around the world. But if every child was vaccinated against hepatitis B virus at birth, the number of cancer cases on the globe would decrease 20%. So this is something that we can do now that would significantly reduce cancer. We think that there are other strategies to target other infections which cause cancer and reduce the cancer burden worldwide. So given that we have this focus on infections causing cancer, how do you study that? What's the best way to actually build a model to show that you can do something about these infection-related cancers? Well, I told you that 25% of cancers around the world are caused by infectious diseases, but that's not equally distributed. So here, for instance, in Washington State, about 11% of cancers are caused by an infection. But in other parts of the world, over 60% of cancers are caused by an infectious disease. And what I came to learn was that in Uganda, about 60% of the cancers are caused by an infectious disease. And so that seemed like a very good place to begin to study and to try and make meaningful interventions to reduce the burden of infection-related cancers. So in 2004, the Hutchinson Center and I initiated a collaboration with the Uganda Cancer Institute in Kampala to try and build a collaboration that had a number of different goals. One was to study these cancers which are caused by infections and study new ways to prevent and treat them. The second was to build the capacity to care for cancer in low-resource settings. Uganda has more cancer cases every year on a per-person basis than the United States does, but at the time had only one oncologist for 34 million people, working in one cancer center that had no running water, no electricity, not reliable access to medications. So that wasn't an environment where you could really make a meaningful difference. And finally, to come up with new ways of caring for cancer in low-resource settings. So that combination of research, capacity building, and clinical care was how we founded this relationship in Uganda now 10 years ago. And over the subsequent 10 years, we've had a number of really exciting things that we've done that I think really have shown how we can build the capacity for cancer care in low-resource countries, but also make meaningful observations about what causes cancer and how to prevent and treat it for people here in the United States.
Great.
So that's been the focus of this collaboration. I can tell you about some of the major milestones. So I told you that there was one oncologist in Uganda when we started this program 10 years ago. There are 16 now. Now, I have 16 oncologists just on my floor at the Hutchinson Center. So obviously that's not enough for a country of 36 million people now and a region that actually cares for close to 100 million people. So it's not enough, but 16 is much more than one, and that really affords unique opportunities for making meaningful differences against cancer. We have programs where the most common cancer in adults and the most common cancer in children in East Africa are treated in a new comprehensive way, where we think we've probably doubled survival for these cancers in a way that is resource appropriate. And finally, the research that we've done, I think, has made a number of observations that will allow us to target and treat cancers that are caused by infections here in the United States. And these are things like stomach cancer, lymphoma, sarcoma, liver cancer, so very common cancers here in the United States. Through studying in Uganda, we've made some important scientific observations that I think will really help us to prevent and treat these diseases here in the United States, as well as in low-resource settings.
So clearly you do a lot of research in cancer, and 16 oncologists is a huge jump from one. How did those people get educated? Can you tell us about the education and outreach component of what you do?
Yeah, sure. So again, training is a really central function, and while we've trained 16 oncologists, overall we've trained over 300 people in cancer care and research in Uganda. Some of these, the majority of those individuals, 90+%, are Ugandans, but 10% or so are people from the United States. And as you know, here in Washington State, there's an incredible emphasis and desire for education in global health. So we've been a big part of that by sending trainees from the University of Washington, from the Hutchinson Center, from all of our affiliated institutions to Uganda to learn the discipline of global oncology and global health. The training programs we have are unique in that they focus at many different levels. We train leaders, managers, and implementers, and we train them in a pyramid style. So any program, whether it's a health-based program or a research program, needs people at all of these levels. At the highest level, our leaders, we actually bring them to Seattle, and we train them in a 13 to 18-month training program. So these 16 oncologists, for instance, all came to the Hutchinson Center and trained side by side with our US-based oncology trainees and our oncology faculty here. They did rotations, for instance, at the University of Washington Medical Center, at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, at Seattle Children's Hospital, and they worked side by side to learn the contemporary management of cancer in a high-resource setting. They then worked with their faculty mentors to understand how those practices could be adapted to cancer in a low-resource setting. And that work together now has allowed them, all 16 of them have returned to Uganda, are back there working on these cancers and adapting entirely new ways of dealing with cancer in low-resource settings. I mean, I didn't go into this, but cancer in Africa is a major, major problem. We now know many people in the Washington area are well familiar with communicable diseases and their role in health burdens. So our work in the Washington State region on HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, this is well known. Communicable zoonotic diseases. These are things that we really appreciate. What's been underappreciated is the contribution of non-communicable diseases to mortality and morbidity in low-resource countries. And so what we now know is that more people in low and middle-income countries will die of cancer than of HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. So given that, we really need new strategies for dealing with diseases like cancer in these low-resource settings. But the problem is that cancer looks like a totally different entity in a low-resource setting. The overwhelming majority of patients come with very advanced stage disease, and the disease actually, I think, has a very unique biology in that some of the cancers just act and appear differently than other cancers in the United States. So these individuals are going back to Uganda, are developing new ways of treating cancer in that context that we think are then scalable and applicable throughout the region and throughout lower income countries. So it's a very exciting way that we take individuals here, we put them through a comprehensive training program. They take courses at the University of Washington, they do clinical rotations at our clinical institutions, and they work with research mentors to develop research projects, write scientific papers, get grants, do everything that our traditional faculty members do here, but doing it in that context. To help them succeed when they go back to Uganda, we also now have a comprehensive training and peer mentoring program that's led by one of our on-site faculty members there. And more than that, we have a brand new state-of-the-art $10 million research, training, and clinical care facility that will be opening at the end of the year that will really be the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa. So we think that through all of those efforts, we can really make meaningful differences for cancer, again, for people in Uganda, but also for people across the world.
Great. So let's come back to Washington. Why Washington? We've talked a lot about at this conference about how in 10 years we want to make Washington will be the premier place for healthcare research, education, innovation. Can you talk about why Fred Hutch is so successful in this area? Is it partnerships? Is it funding? Can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, we're very fortunate. I think you're right. I mean, we have an embarrassment of riches here in Washington State. And I think that this discipline that I'm talking about, we call global oncology. I would say that it's really the first and the most comprehensive effort in this in the world. And you could ask, why is that happening here in Washington, and why did it sort of start at the Hutch? Well, this is, I think, what I'm seeing is that research and medical care is increasingly becoming interdisciplinary. So you need people with skills in a wide variety of areas to be able to come together and work collaboratively on a problem that is outside their specific discipline. And, I've had the privilege of training in some pretty established, and renowned places across the country, but I've never been in an environment like in Washington, where you have that collaborative spirit, but you also have the resources available to you to have the experts that you need. So for the discipline of global oncology, we needed people who were well-versed in global health. And again, with the University of Washington's Global Health School, with the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation that's here in Seattle, with the Gates Foundation, with places like PATH, you have really world experts in global health science and implementation. So they're here, and they were brought into the fold. At the same time, from my particular discipline, studying infection-related cancers, you need scientists who are well-versed in infectious disease, but also who are well-versed in oncology. And the Hutchinson Center is a very unique place. We were started essentially with the technology that invented bone marrow transplantation. And bone marrow transplantation was a unique and revolutionary life-saving technology for cancer when it was invented several decades ago. But the unfortunate sort of side of the bone marrow transplant story that is not as well understood is that while all of those patients were cured of their cancers, many of them died of infectious diseases that ravaged them when their immune systems were weak. So from very early on, we had experts in infectious disease working side by side with experts in cancer. And so to study that discipline of infection-related cancers in a place like Uganda, we had those experts in global health, we had those experts in infectious disease, we had those experts in cancer, in epidemiology, in public health sciences, and all of those coming together was what I think really made this program a success. And that, I think, can really only be catalyzed in a very small number of places in the world, and Washington is clearly one of them.
It's really exciting stuff. Thank you so much for the interview. This has been Dr. Corey Casper from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Institute. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.